Hi everyone, it's Daphne from Scrap and Create, and today I'm here to start work on a brand new mini album. And this mini album, I'm going to do something a little bit different, and it's really going to be a mini album. It is going to be a 4x6, so it's going to be pretty small. I am going to use the Graphic 45 regular tags as the pages in my album. So it's going to be a little bit different than what I normally do. I normally build out some pocket pages. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with what we're going to need to get going. So we are going to need some glue, some tape, chipboard, and some black cardstock to get going. So we're going to start with 2 chipboard pieces, 3 7/8 by 6. 3 7/8 by 6. You'll need 2 of those, and they're going to go in this direction. And then you'll need a 3 7/8 by 2.5, and that's going to be the spine. So it's in addition to being really small, which is different for me, it's also going to be in a landscape format, which is a little bit different for me. So I've gone ahead and started laying out some of what we're going to be doing today. So I took 2 8.5 by 11 pieces of cardstock. This is 65-pound cardstock, and my favorite brand is Neenah, Neenah. And this is called Astro Brights, and I picked mine up at Walmart, but you might be able to find it someplace else. It won't be in the craft section. You'll find it over in the office section, and it's 65 pounds. So I've got 2 8.5 by 11s, and I've attached them together by just running a simple piece of tape between the two, so I've got this extended piece of paper. So what I went ahead and did was some reference lines here. So based on where the center of this sheet is going to be, I want this seam to line up with the spine of my book. So I went ahead and put a reference line down here, and the way I come up with my reference line is I just lay a ruler down and draw a line the width of the ruler. So it's about 1 1/8 inch wide, but it really just needs to be wide enough to fold over the edge of the paper when we're done. So I've gone ahead and put some tape on the back of these. And I've got my pick tool here. So the first thing I'm going to lay down is this spine piece, and then I'll measure both the left and right covers off the centerpiece. So I'm going to take the backing off my tape, and then I'm going to add some glue to this and lay it down. And I'm not worried about being totally precise because this is going to get wrapped and you're not going to see the edges of the paper. It'll just be a solid piece of black on the other side. So don't stress too much about getting these lines straight or angles straight. What really matters is that these pieces are straight with each other, that there's nothing like this going on. If it turns out cockeyed on the paper, we can recover. But if you don't have a good space between the two of these, or if it's not even top to bottom, that's when we have a little bit of trouble. So that's where you want to spend your time. All right. And I just noticed I got in here without my spacer, darn it. So I'm going to go ahead and lay this down, and then I'm going to pause this and go get my spacer. And the spacer is 2 pieces of the whatever chipboard width you're using glued together so that you basically have the double width of this paper to use as your spacer. All right, and I just put a small pencil line at the bottom to get this located, and again I'm working to get this seam in the middle of the spine. I don't want it on the front or the back of the cover. I'll be right back with my spacer. Okay, sorry about that. I'm back, and here's my spacer, and like I was saying, it's basically the whatever chipboard you're using, and they can vary in thickness, but make sure you're using the same chipboard. Take 2 pieces of scrap, just make sure they're flush on the side that you're going to put down, and glue them together so it's double wide. That's what I'm going to use to space these pieces so that when I open and close the book, there's enough space between the spine and the cover that we don't bind, pinch, or tear the cardstock. Okay, so with that, I think I'm ready to go ahead and take the tape off. And I'm going to start on my right hand side and get this in. Oops. I missed one. And this is just a simple pick tool. It's most commonly used with cutting tools like Cricut or any cut and scan or Cameo, which is the machine I use. And it's actually a silhouette tool. but I find that it works very easy to lift the tape, and it speeds up my process a lot. So if you don't have a pick tool, I would suggest getting one. I don't have a favorite brand. I just happen to have the Silhouette one. I think they all do an adequate job. Okay, so now, as I mentioned, we want to have an even space here. So I'm going to push this cardboard as tight to this spine piece as I can. Then I'm going to come in at an angle with this piece. And I'm looking to line up this corner and this corner so that it's up and down the right, and I'm going to use this tool to space it. All right. And I'm coming at about 30 degrees off the paper. And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want the tape or the glue to grab until I'm sure I've got it lined up here the way I want it. And you're going to have to pardon my head, but I think it is going to get it in the shot until I get this laid down the way I want it. And then I'm pushing hard enough that this will stand on its own. And then I'm going to lay that down. And that's it. We've done the first one. Okay, we're going to do the same thing over here. And this process is consistent with all my other albums. There's nothing different about wrapping the cover and the spine here. What will be different is the page, what I'm doing to create the pages. Okay, same thing. We're going to use this as a space. I'm going to turn it this way so I can see these corners nicely. Add some glue. And the purpose of the glue in this application is to give me a little time between laying it down and it becoming permanent. Tape is very tacky, and the glue will allow me to slide things around just a little. Okay, I'm in. So that is done. So I've already put in a reference line up here, which is basically the same distance, a little over an inch on each side. I am just going to trim off all this excess, and then we're going to start folding the paper over to finish the wrap process. And again, this is 65-pound black cardstock. I have found 65-pound, at least for wrapping the album, to be ideal. I think if you go heavier, you're really running the risk of your paper cracking when you fold it over on itself with the chipboard in between. So another way I've seen this done is people attach the three pieces using some cardstock just for the hinge, and then paint the edges of the chipboard. I like to wrap it. I think it gives it a much cleaner, more finished and uniform look. But it's really preference, because it'll be the same as everything on the inside too. And you just don't get that with paint. So I need a reference line on this side, and like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just going to use this as a guide, because I don't need this much paper when I go to fold it over. It'll be just too much bulk inside. Okay, now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same tool, and remember this is double wide, and I'm going to use that to draw a quick trim line here so that I leave enough space between the corner of the chipboard and the trim line so that I have enough, I've got adequate paper to get that corner covered. You don't want your corner exposed. It's easier to trim more paper later. You can't add it back on. So that's my guide. And usually I do wind up doing all my folding and adhering, and it turns out I usually have to trim a little bit more, but I'm okay with that. I'd rather do that than to come back with a Sharpie and color my corner in. Or worse yet, rewrap it. I'm not worried about any of this looking good because it's all going to get covered. So it's not something you want to spend your time on. Okay, now I'm going to start working at my edges. And right now I'm just focused on bending them over, having it be tight to the chipboard. There we go. And now I'm going to do both ends. Okay, same thing on this end. And then once I get this initial crease in for all 4 sides, I'm going to come back and put my tape in. Okay, the way I apply my tape is I always put a strip of tape around the whole edge. So I'm going to apply this directly to the chipboard. And so I know when I fold my paper over, all this tape is going to cover the bottom half of this cardstock. And then to complete my coverage, I'm going to put tape on top, and it'll cover the top part of the cardstock. So between the 2 lines of tape, I'm going to have 100% coverage here on this flap. And hopefully that makes sense. And I'll fold it over quickly and show you what I mean. So as you start to fold this over, you can see this tape is going to grab all that black cardstock here, and this will reach over and give us the coverage we need on the top of the paper. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Cover the chipboard end to end, and then add it to the cardstock. And I'm using 1-inch Scor-Tape right now. You can use whatever you like. It doesn't have to be this thick. I happen to have this. And as a rule of thumb, I like to have 1 inch, 3/8, and 1/4. Those are the most commonly used widths for me. 3/8 is perfect if you have a 1/2 inch hinge. It will cover that and not go beyond the edge. If you have a 1/2 inch Scor-Tape on a 1/2 inch hinge, it actually is a little bit wider because of the fold mark. So 3/8 works perfect. Okay. Do the same thing on this end, and then I'm going to come back with my bone folder, and I'm going to burnish everything, and then I am going to start wrapping. Actually start putting the wrap down. So I am going to be using this little mini album to feature some photos from a trip. So this is going to be a very event-specific mini album that I'm making. That's partly why I'm going with a smaller format. I don't need, 30 photos in here. I'm going to put a dozen photos from a trip. It's a trip to Hawaii, so it's got some tropical themes to it. So the paper that I chose is Graphic 45 Tropical Travelogue, and it's going to look beautiful with this. I'm very excited. And you will see when I'm done. But you could do, this is a great small format for lots of things. With graduation right around the corner, you could make a small graduation album and just put all the photos from that day in this small package, and then you've got a great gift to give to the graduate and or to the parents, grandparents of the graduating person. It's just a small, beautiful little album. It'll be very giftable. Of course, all albums are, but the smaller ones seem to just have that little special oomph to them. And they're not so large that people look at it and go, I don't know what I'm going to do with that. That's too big. I can't save it. I don't know where to put it. This is a great little small album design. So I'm going to show you really quick. So right here you can see I've got a little extra paper. So I'm going to push this down and this down tightly around, so it kind of, I'm not sure you're going to see this, but I'm going around the bit of the chipboard and pressing it before I fold this up. And that is where my extra paper is going to go and disappear. I'm doing that on all 4 corners before I fold this over. And it does take a little bit of work. You have to be a little patient. Otherwise you might have a little piece that sticks out a little. There we go. So before you push it all the way in place, you just kind of want to, look at it and make sure it's laying down flat. And this looks pretty good. And then you can also come back with your bone folder and smooth out any rough edges you might have. And that looks pretty good. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to go ahead and get this up, and then I'm going to make sure this is pushed all the way down. Coming around the corner. And if I look, this looks like it's going to stick over a little bit. So there's a couple things I can do. I can fold that in, or this is easier, and I always want to cut away from the corner, not toward it, and that will be perfectly clean now. Never cut this way, always cut away from the corner. I'm just taking that little tiny tab off. And look how beautiful that turned out. Okay, so that's done. I'm going to burnish everything. And then I'm going to start working my spine. Okay, and then with that, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to do some measurements, and then I'm going to come back with a piece that's going to lay over the center and cover everything, because this will be the inside panels. When the book is open, you'll see this. And I'm going to cover this. So I'll be back with a piece of paper that's trimmed to fit. Okay, I'm back, and I've trimmed down a piece of paper to fit. And basically I did the same thing. I took two 8.5 by 11s and put them end to end so that I've got the coverage that I need, because this is actually quite wide. When it's fully extended, it is 14.5 inches wide. So I've got this trimmed down, and what I did is I glue it together, and then I lay it down, and I just put some tick marks and trim it out to size, like I said. So I'm gonna go ahead and get some tape on this and get this laid down, and then we will have the cover of the book completed. And this shouldn't take very long. And I'm working with artificial light, so I have a little bit of shadow to deal with here. So you'll have to be patient with me. It's hard for me to see my edges right now, so I'm going a little slower than usual, but it'll be done soon. Okay, so I'm going to go around the edges, and then I'm going to put some tape in the middle, and then I'm going to put some glue around it. So I've got a little bit of time to get it positioned, because even though it's not very wide, it's quite long, so it may take me a minute to figure out where my permanent placement will be. Okay. And the reason I want to put some tape down here is once you lay it down here and then you do this, there's a chance that there could be some bubbling here. So I definitely want to make sure I've got tape on the inside as well, not just around the edges, because we don't want that. There is a way to solve it if you do wind up with a bubble. You can pierce the paper and then stick your glue tip in and get some glue down, and then press the air out. It's not very pretty, but it's not that big of a deal, because usually you have a decorative piece of designer paper on top of it anyway. But it's best to try to avoid it altogether. And to think of this as kind of a foundation layer. So the better this goes down, the better all your designer papers will go on top of it. Okay, just take me a minute to get all this, the backings off. You also want to try to get your tape to lay down as flat as possible. If there's any folds or buckles in the tape, it will show through when you lay it down. Okay, trying to hit the trash can. Okay, now we're going to get that glue down on the edges. And it doesn't take a lot. It's just a bead of glue, and that bead of glue is just enough to elevate the cardstock to allow it to slide and to prevent the tape from gripping. So you don't have to, you know, cover every square inch of the tape. You just have to have a bead of glue on every piece of tape. And that should be enough. Okay, now we're going to lay this down. And the goal is to try to center it. Left, right, front, center. And I'm going to lay down one side and then use my hand to push toward the other end. And that is hopefully going to help us squeeze out any air bubbles. Okay, that's in. And again, I'm not too terribly worried about, got some excess glue here, worried about, and I think that came off me, not off the tape, about this being perfect because this will be covered with designer paper. And it looks good. It looks like I got no bubbles, which is perfect. Okay, now we're going to work the paper so that we can open and close the book. Okay. There we go. Okay, and then the final step to finish the book, I'm just going to work this kind of slow, is we're going to add these tags, which will become the pages in this album. And they're just a simple hinge. I've scored this at 3/8 of an inch right here along the 5.5 inch side. Score at 3/8 of an inch, and that becomes the waterfall hinge that's going to attach it to the book. And then I'm going to show you a quick trick. So we want these to be evenly spaced, and I want a 3/8 inch gusset between each one, so there's some spacing here between each one of the tags. And here I'm going to lay down my first one, and instead of laying it down from left to right, I'm going to lay it down right to left. And why? I'm going to make sure I decide which side I want. I think I want this to be the cover. And that's only because the seam is a little off center, so I want it to be pushed toward the back. So this will be the back, this is the front liner. So I want a 1/2 inch gusset or 3/8 inch gusset between each one of these panels and between each one of the pages. So if I lay down this way, it's a little harder because the hinge is going this way. So I'm going to lay down my first one here, and this is actually starting on the right hand side, and these are the same width as the book. So you just want to make sure that top to bottom, it's actually a little bit slightly off. Man, the light's tough in here. Sorry about that. You want to make sure you steer clear of the score line, and because you want your page to operate freely. And I'm laying it down like this because I want to make sure that when the book is open that my tag is not higher than the cover or lower than the cover. So I'm laying it down and inch it over, squeeze it over just a little bit. And I'm liking that. And then once you get the first one in, everything else will line up off of this. So now this first one's in, and I'm clear of the cover, so it'll continue to operate. So now I'm going to lay every subsequent one off of this. So I'll put this one in, and I'm going to butt this edge up against this edge, and I'll do that repeatedly until I get all 6 of these in. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with that. And again, I'm just adding a little glue, and that gives me just a little bit of time to move it around. And I'm going to do the same thing. I really want to lay this down with the tag next to it to make sure it's not too high or too low before I press it into place. And that looks pretty good. There we go. And now you can see the edge of this hinge is butted right against this score line. I'm going to do that 4 more times, and then we'll have all of our pages in the book. And this becomes this cute little, fast, super easy to make mini that, like I said, I think is very, very giftable. And goes together so fast. So if you're just in the mood to do a quick project that you can start and finish in one sitting, this is it. This is the one for you. Some of my other mini albums, you really got to have some stamina. Oops, that one didn't go in quite as I expected. And that's what that glue is helping me out with. Okay. And then when I get these all laid down, I'm going to come back and burnish everything into place. I'm just more focused on getting these in straight right now, and not so worried about the glue adhering. This one, for some reason I didn't get a tape on, but that's all right. I'll just glue it into place. I think we're going to be fine. This is our last one. As you can see, because I started on the other side, in the end, I'm going to be left with a nice 3/8 inch gusset, which gives me clearance on the front and back. So that if I have any embellishments, anything on top of the card, it won't interfere with the cover. Okay, now I'm going to go back and burnish everything into place because it looks good. This is so cute. I love it. So these tags come in a package of 9, and we are using 6 for the inside, and then I think I'm going to use some on the outside to actually hold it closed. And so the way that this is designed, the tags fit perfectly inside the cover, and then I've got a little bit of space. I think I've got a 1/2 inch beyond the size of the tag itself, so that if I've got ribbon or anything hanging off the tag, it's still basically protected by the edge of the book. So that's kind of the design process that I had. You can easily make this shorter, the same length, or yeah, same length as of the tag if you like, but I chose to make it a little bit shorter. So that is it. So we have finished making our quick, fast, easy little mini album featuring graphic 45 tags as the pages. I'm going to start decorating, and so my next video will be covering the decoration of this album. So hey, thanks for tuning in. If you like, be sure to click the like button and subscribe, and if you're interested to find out what materials I'm using, click the more button, and there'll be a list with links to our shop of all the material that's used in this project. So thanks for tuning in. Again, this is Daphne from Scrap and Create, and this is my, let me double check, 4x6 mini album. Thanks.